Hello and welcome to a brand new complete novices YouTube channel. My name is Paul Bullock and most of you will know me from the painting communities as Bully, and you'll maybe know my little tiny corner of Facebook, which is Bully's Painting Parlour. I absolutely love this community, and if any of you know the story of my personal life with my daughter and Poppy's Angels and stuff, you will know why. I'm also an absolutely passionate painter and modeler because it's always been a form of art for me. It's a huge distraction, and it's my favourite pastime in life, pretty much. It's an outlet for being creative. I have been painting for a long time. I'm 37 years old. I started painting when I was 9, and I started airbrushing around about 5 years ago, then took a frustration break, threw many things at the wall, and started again about 3 years ago. I'm self-taught at airbrushing. I didn't know anything about airbrushing. I watched a few tiny little crappy videos to try and learn and got everything horribly wrong. And the more and more I read stuff on Facebook and on the forums about airbrushing, the more I realise that there's a complete level of ignorance out there in terms of how to use an airbrush and why you use an airbrush and how much of a complicated tool it is. And there are therefore hundreds and hundreds of painters who don't use an airbrush because they think it's cheating or whatever. But I think those hundreds of painters would probably like to give it a go and are precluded from doing that because it's so complicated and not understanding. And there's nowhere that actually teaches you readily how to go about using an airbrush with any level of confidence. So I thought I might try and give something back to the community. I charge for airbrush lessons one-on-one. I charge 150 quid a day for a one-on-one airbrush with somebody. But actually the community does so much for me, I figured me rambling on YouTube videos I could happily do for free. So what I intend to do with this series of videos is provide a tiny backwater of the internet where if you are aspiring to be a painter who uses an airbrush, that I take you in a series of numbered videos in the same way I would do with my lessons right the way through to advanced. And I will teach you from the very basics right the way up to some of the fairly creative and fun stuff that we can do when you're a confident and experienced airbrusher. Now, what's great is by the very nature of the people watching this, most of you will have found this via Revia Metal or another Facebook group, and therefore you're all going to be veteran and experienced painters. So hopefully I won't teach you anything you don't know in terms of colours and blending and colour theory, and we can focus pretty much entirely on an airbrush as a tool and the results that you can gain from that tool. So in front of you, you can see one of the fantastic sculpts from Tiny Leads. This is the Wizard bust. And when I first got these busts, what I did is I pre-shaded the bust, and we'll talk about that in a little while, and I just blasted it with a colour. And I did that with all of the busts because what I wanted to do in advance was to mask them with colour, so I knew what the skin tone base was going to be for each model in the bust range because I wanted each of them to be different. So what I aim to do throughout the course of this series is to take you from this stage, which you can see on the camera right now, which I imagine a lot of you who have been trying airbrushing have at least got to, and my aim is to take you to this stage. So sorry about the shaky hands, it's a problem of being a wino. Here we can see the Barbarian bust again from Tiny Leads that I have finished, and it's my assertion that the combination of a skilled airbrush user and a skilled brush user can produce really quite nice pieces of work. This clearly isn't world class, but it's quite nice, and it dramatically increases the speed of your painting. And I get a lot of satisfaction from that because the results become more evident and it really softens the blends on the work. So here on this Barbarian bust, you can see, if you have a keen eye, that I've done a mixture of airbrush blending and then loaded brush. If you don't know what loaded brush is, go and check out Painting Buddha, or particularly the master of loaded brush is Ben Comets. And like everybody else, I've learned from my friend Ben in terms of how to go about doing loaded brush, and you can see that with the soft transitions here. So I don't think an airbrush alone can produce a beautifully painted model. I think an airbrush can provide an exceptionally good canvas for a beautifully painted model, and indeed you can see all of the shading and everything on this face was all mapped in with an airbrush previously, but if you look closely, hopefully you can see all of my brush strokes as well. So an airbrush is a tool, it isn't a means to an end. For anybody who thinks airbrushing is easy, I'll challenge you over the course of this series to prove that, because quite frankly, it's not. In fact, I would say that using an airbrush with a degree of skill is harder than using a brush. You're using something that doesn't make contact with the surface of the miniature and is under pressure and is using paint consistencies that you may or may not be unfamiliar with, and it is very, very difficult. So this barbarian bust is a happy contrast between brushwork and airbrush work. Obviously the tat that you can see there is brushwork on top of the skin tones, but I often base my minis with an airbrush because it's really important to get good soft transitional blends. I treat an airbrush as a roadmap. You'll hear myself and other artists talk about pre-shading all of the time. There's no mystery to using an airbrush, there's no dark art, it's not witchcraft, it just takes a bit of practice to get your skills up, which is the reason for me doing these videos. So please be kind when you leave your comments. I've never done YouTube videos before. I'm not an editor. I've done this to help, and I will listen to your feedback and try and adapt my further videos. I don't want any money from anybody for this. I don't need Patreons or anything else. The community does more than enough for my family. So this is just something from me to do to see if I can get more people using airbrushes. This is video 1, and this is purely an introduction. We're not going to do anything technical in this video. I just wanted to get my point across and introduce myself a little bit. Why should you listen to me? There's no reason whatsoever. I'm not famous. I'm not an amazing painter. I aspire to be an amazing painter. I'm a solid painter, I think. I'm pretty good with an airbrush, and I'm pretty good at teaching airbrush. A lot of my students have enjoyed really good results, and I really enjoy them getting those results. So as a disclaimer, all of the products and the stuff that I talk about in these videos are purely personal perception and personal opinion. So I will go through the products that I use. I will talk to you about a brand of airbrushes or brands of airbrushes and compressors and lines and inline filters and paints and everything else. But it's just my own personal perception out of experience. All good painters use a mixture of tools and paints. Specifically, I am a Harder and Steenbeck airbrush fan. I call them my girls, and I have 4 of them. Most painters will not need 4 airbrushes. Only the likes of Angel and Miles, who you'll all be familiar with from Evia Metal, who are professional painters, may need that many. I use 4 because I'm a semi-professional painter, and you will probably recognise my work as an army painter more than anything else. And I use it for speed. I will run through in this series of videos from start to finish the absolute basics right the way through to some of the incredible candy blending and transitional fades that you can do with an airbrush and a steady hand. I hope you really enjoy the series, and I hope you stay tuned and share it about a bit. And please don't be too unkind with your comments. Okay guys, I will see you in the next video, which will be the first educational video.